Howdy folks, Fuerev here. I've come to tell you a story. It's a difficult story for me to tell. There are a lot of other stories that I would rather be telling you, but this one I guess I just have to get off my chest. It's a story that's been haunting me for a very long time. I think about it often. It affects me deeply and greatly. It affects my life profoundly. It may be a story to which some of you can relate. When I was a boy, maybe 3-4 years old, my father remarried. The woman that he married was a lot younger than he, from a large family. A questionable bunch they, I suppose, in retrospect, but at my young age it was impossible for me to discern between one character and the next, including this new wife of my father's. I felt at the time that she was a bit of an interloper. I loved my father, and I still do. And at the time, it felt that she was intruding. And at the time, as it turns out, she felt the same. From when I was 4 until I was about 9 years old, I was abused by her repeatedly, continuously, in a number of different ways. It began under difficult circumstances. Finances were poor. We were stretched thin. We had taken up residence with another family. We shared a split-level duplex with them. Things were close, cramped, tight. Most everybody was at work all day, but I was home. The kids were home, and she was home. The rest of the kids took care of themselves. They were a little bit older than I was. Everybody got fed. Everybody was fine. But immediately she took a dislike to me, and every night before I went to bed, she would send me off to bed and shove me down onto the mat, onto the sleeping bag that was on a hard wood floor. And that's how she would send me off at night. She spent a long time under different living circumstances finding excuses to engage in the beatings. She would grab one of my father's belts and tell me to pull my pants down and snap the belt from across the house so that I would hear it coming. And she would unleash. This was not a controlled sort of circumstance. I understand the concept of spare the rod and spoil the child, although I don't necessarily agree with it. But I do understand that these things can be applied in such a way as to be disciplinary and not simply venting anger. But she was not being disciplinary. She was simply being insane. She would beat me up, down, all around the house. I would crawl over furniture as she chased me, and finally end up under a table. She would be screaming the whole way until she had finally gotten it out of her system, until she had finally exhausted herself. And then it would be done, and I would be lying on the floor, crying, barely able to breathe. She broke all my teeth out. Not all of them, but many of them. Or several anyway. It's difficult to remember the details after all these years. My baby teeth, as they were coming in, she said were coming in crooked. So she broke them out, and not all at once, you know, but one at a time. She would tell me to stand still, and she would place her hand on the back of my head, and with a thumb, simply press, and press, and press, on teeth, loose or no, until they popped. I don't remember how many times that happened, but I suppose it makes enough of an impression that it seems like 1,000. But it's impossible for me to remember. Of course, the upshot is that I never had to wear braces because my teeth had plenty of room to come in. I suppose the lesson here is that you should not take your smile for granted. For a long time, she was abusive toward me, physically, but also mentally. You see, because she was my father's second wife, and because I spent weekends at home with my mother, I would show back up to their house on Monday, and she would sit me down in the bathroom while my father was at work, and the smell of Aquanet, I remember it permeating the air, sit me down on the toilet lid and ask me, "What has your mother said about me this weekend? What did she say about me this time?" And my mother is not one to ever say anything bad about anyone. She knew, my mother, that it would be most distressing to a young child to hear that sort of back and forth between divorced parents, and she never engaged in it. My mother is a woman of high integrity, as is my father, a man of high integrity, and he never engaged in that sort of behavior either. But my stepmother would have none of it, and so she would coax, and she would goad until I would come up with something, and then I would be punished for it. She would be angry at something or someone, or simply just unstable and having a hormonal rush or whatever, and she would similarly goad me until finally I came up with some thing that I did for which I could be justifiably punished. I came up with many justifications for many of the beatings that I received. For a long time during my childhood, I was a pathological liar. I was the kid who was always telling lies about everything. Because of this, I spent a long time standing in the corners of rooms with the curtains drawn closed, afraid to open them and look at the sun outside, for fear that she would be set off by some difference, some change in the room. But she would always be set off anyway. And this is the thing about abuse, about the abuse of children, is that there is a total sense of futility and powerlessness learned at such a young age. As humans, we try to solve problems. We try to end our pain and suffering. It is the basis of our morality. It's an animal instinct. We try, and when we are met with failure at the hands of someone bigger, stronger, and completely irrational, there's absolutely nothing we can do but crawl inside of ourselves and try to die. But because we are animals, given this energy of life, we are too vital to simply die, at least in some cases.